All right, guys, welcome back to another daily drop here for an organization formerly known as Tar Heel Illustrated, now operating as THI, as we're in a bit of a transition period right now. Hopefully I have some things to announce sooner rather than later with what our next move is going to be. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here to kind of dive into it's funny because I'm trying to reference a piece that is I guess you can no longer find because of the Tar Heel Illustrated.
You might be able to find it. I don't know.
It's probably still out there. I would assume so. At least I
can still find a lot of my Wilmington Star News and Fox Sports pieces.
That's true. It's hard to scrub everything off the internet. It's out there somewhere, especially with, I think, would you run it a couple weeks ago now? It hadn't been that long since it came out. But essentially, this is something I think we've talked about on pods before in the past, or kind of, we've never really gone in depth and done a podcast about it. But I think we've mentioned it before, or at least you've mentioned the idea of it. But you've come up kind of with an idea of having an annual college basketball tournament in Raleigh every year where Duke, Carolina, and NC State would kind of cycle through every year hosting the tournament. I know it's a little bit of a throwback to the Dixie Classic that used to go on in this area way back in the day, way before my time, I should say. But I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think something that would be not only great for basketball in this area, which just has such a rich history, but also for the country. I think having a tournament like that would obviously would bring a lot of TV revenue and TV eyes too. So I'm going to kick it to you and let you kind of provide a little bit more context on what exactly it would look like and why you think it would ultimately be a good idea to potentially do moving forward.
Well, the MTEs, multi-team events, are a big thing now, and you don't have to play them outside the continental 48 states in order to get the extra games added to the schedule. Now, you used to have to do that. That's why people were clamoring to go to. That's why people used to go to Alaska for the Great Alaska Shootout, which used to be the premier early season tournament. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That was a big deal long before the preseason NIT started, and then when that started, that was huge. That was the biggest thing going early in college basketball.
I wonder why they picked Alaska. Just out of curiosity,
I don't know the history behind it. It's a great question. It's something I'd like to look up, but I know that there have been some phenomenal games played up there. I think the last time Carolina played in that tournament was in November of '97 when Jamison and Carter were juniors. Okalaja was a junior. Shaman Williams was a senior. Great team. They went up there and just steamrolled teams. They played like Purdue, Seton Hall, UCLA, or something like that. They just killed them.
Such a random place to have it out of everywhere you can have it.
But a lot of players used to love it, and the experience of going up there and having something different. And it was a big deal up there. They played at the University of Alaska. Anchorage Seawolves, I believe, were the host, and they have a decent arena. There was good crowds. I know someone who covered it up there and said it was wild because it was late for like 3 hours a day. But you can do MTEs all the time. There's a successful one in Charleston now. There's one in Myrtle Beach. There's one in Orlando at Disney. Is that Disneyland or World there? Which one?
Yeah, Disney World's in Florida.
Okay, I always get that confused. Yep. But you've got them in all over the place now. You've got them in even like at Cancun. You got Corpus Christi. You've got a couple places in Texas where you have them. You got a couple of them in California. The event that Carolina played in Portland before, the Phil Knight, 80 and 85, those were MTEs. And what it is that previously you were allowed to play, you had 29 games on the schedule, and you can add a tournament of like 3 games, and 2 of them would not count against the 20, or the 3 wouldn't count against the 29. You could play up to 31 games. So the first one would be a regular game. The other 2 were extra games to play. Carolina played 32 regular season games last year because they went to Hawaii and played at Hawaii. Any team that's in Hawaii's conference, they get an extra game for football or basketball if they play them on the road outside the continental 48. Now, next season, college basketball is going to 32. So it's even more of a reason to have a game here. And I know that some of these programs like to travel and go to different places, but I believe an 8-team, 3-day MTE in Raleigh needs to happen. This is first of all, the Jimmy V Classic, why it's never in Raleigh makes 0 sense, but I'll go beyond that. This is one of the great hotbeds for college basketball. I remember NC State hosted something in November of 2004. I covered all 3 days of it, where schools like ECU was there. I think Marist was there. Oregon State was there. In fact, the great Taylor Zarza was doing the radio for Oregon State for a couple of days because their main radio crew had to go home for the Civil War, for the football game, Oregon State. And there were some other schools there. I can't remember who else was there. But it was a pretty cool tournament, but it wasn't big enough. Like, it didn't have enough big names. You need to have something in which you have 8 programs come in. You rotate the main host, being Carolina, Duke, or State. Just keep rotating them. And you bring in a Big East team, a Big 10 team, SEC, Big 12, bring in like a Mountain West, bring in an Atlantic 10 team, and maybe have a couple locals. Let's say you have Carolina hosting next year. You also bring in Iowa, Seton Hall, LSU, Kansas State. You bring in New Mexico, Richmond, and then you have maybe like North Carolina A&T and UNC Wilmington or something. Yeah. Or East Carolina, something like that. So you have a few in-state schools and you bring in other programs, and it's a 3-day event. You play 3 games. You get a chance to play some decent competition. They're neutral site games, and it's a celebration of college basketball at a place that needs to celebrate it. And it's sort of a throwback to the old Dixie Classic too.
And I think too, it's revenue generating, obviously, for the schools. And I don't know if you've sit here and ironed out how all that would work, if the host site would end up getting more of the revenue. But I think, again, one of the things with it is when you have the 3 of NC State, Carolina, and Duke in a local area like this in Raleigh, again, just that alone is going to bring a lot of fanfare, not to mention all the other schools that are coming in that'll bring their own set of fans with them too. And also might have the chance to, Iowa gets to play, or New Mexico gets to play North Carolina. I mean, people will show out for that. And obviously Carolina fans will show out for that. Duke fans will go to those games. State fans will go to those games. So it obviously functions as a revenue generator as well, which we know how important that is in the landscape of college sports now. So yeah, I love the idea. And I think also tying in with the Dixie Classic too, which has a relatively rich history, makes a ton of sense. But it almost kind of feels like a no-brainer. It almost kind of feels like, why don't we already have that when you look at just the Tobacco Road and the amount of schools around here and just how rich of a tradition college basketball has here. Feels like this should have been done a long time ago, but again, it hasn't been for whatever reason.
So let's say it stays out of some of these tournaments go Thursday, Friday, Sunday. So to stay out of the way of college football, imagine a Thursday lineup. At noon, you've got Iowa versus Seton Hall. At 2:30, you've got, East Carolina against Kansas State. I think those would draw pretty well. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't fill it up. It's not NC State hosting, Wake. Mm-hmm. It's not the Hurricanes, hosting the Capitals. Mm-hmm. And then the 6:30 game and a 9:00 game, you would have, let's say, LSU against North Carolina, LSU against Richmond, and then Carolina versus North Carolina A&T or UNCW, something like that. Mm-hmm. That's your first day. Those are 2 good sessions. People who are college basketball junkies are going to watch that. They're going to go. And then the next day, the winners go into their bracket, the losers go into their bracket, and then they play again on Sunday. So maybe Sunday you have an NCAA East Carolina matchup for 7th place, that kind of thing, whatever. I just think it's something that we need in this area. These tournaments go on all over the place, and there's nobody there at a lot of them. I think there would be people at these games. I'm not going to say they're going to fill up the lower bowl for Iowa and Seton Hall, but there'll be 5,000 or 6,000 people in there. And I can assure you, when you look at most of these MTEs, they don't have 5,000 or 6,000 people in there.
No,
these are made for TV events. This could be a made for TV event that actually has people that show up and buy tickets and buy hot dogs.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's a celebration in what I think is an area for college basketball that needs to be preserved. Mm-hmm. You can be a football area and a basketball area, but a lot of these places that are football areas will always have a hard time becoming basketball areas too, especially as the emphasis on football grows. States like Kentucky and Indiana and North Carolina, they need to keep basketball super important. Super important. There ought to be a tournament in Indianapolis that's very similar.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That rotates Indiana and Purdue hosting. Mm-hmm. I think we need more of that. Mm-hmm. I know Carolina fans would show out for all 3 games that Carolina plays, and you're buying a ticket for the session. So you're there for the earlier game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you've got Kansas State and Richmond playing before Carolina, or LSU and Richmond, Carolina fans are going to show up and watch that. That's pretty good basketball. Richmond's been historically a pretty solid program. LSU's an SEC program. They've had some success before. People would show up for it. I think it's a no-brainer. And like you said, why in the hell hadn't this been happening already?
Yeah, it does seem a little weird because I agree. I think there's so many reasons why this makes sense, not to mention the TV revenue that would come with it because of the sheer amount of games. And I think there will be a lot of people tuning into it that might not be able to attend it. But I mean, being able to watch a Carolina, let's say on a Friday night, play LSU potentially in a second game. I mean, that's a game that's going to draw some eyeballs. You know what I mean?
Same thing with Duke against LSU or NC State against an LSU.
Yeah. Again, those are big games.
If you bring in some sponsorships, have a different court. Like the NCAA does, like Jordan Brand does when it has that down in Charlotte. So it doesn't look like an NC State home game.
Yeah.
And you can distribute tickets a little bit differently. So it won't be part of the NC State home package. To me, it's a no-brainer. And for those saying, well, what about Wake Forest? What about Wake Forest? They were in the Dixie Classic. And, well, that was when Wake was located right here, 10 minutes from where I live. 10 minutes from where you grew up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a seminary school now. Wake was right here in the triangle then. It's not now. And I just don't think Wake as the headline school is going to move the needle enough. The numbers bear that out. I mean, they don't even sell tickets in Winston-Salem much anymore. And I'm not denigrating Wake. I'm just speaking about reality here. I think it's cheap at the triangle, and you call it a triangle classic. You can't go the Dixie name. Those days are long over.
They're long gone.
I have some Dixie Classic programs because my dad, when he was a student at Carolina, used to go all the time. He used to go to all the games. He'd go to games at Wake, Duke, State, Carolina.
I wonder.
I took him onto the court at Reynolds Coliseum a long time ago before I covered an NC State game when they used to play one a year at Reynolds. And my dad went to the game, and I took them onto the court, and he showed us a spot where he was sitting when a big time shot was made in an NC State game by one of their. I think it was. I can't remember. I don't want to mess up the name, but he was telling us about he saw that at an NC State game when they played Duke or something like that. He's a Carolina student.
Yes,
and he went to a Duke Carolina game I covered a long time ago, and before the game he came down to the front row or something like that, and he was saying, "Yeah, I remember when such and such did that there," and I was like, "Man, that's just cool stuff. Maybe one day I'll tell those stories." So you have that in the past. Let's celebrate what once was and call it the Triangle Classic. So one of the three Triangle schools hosts it. And you might be able to say, look, if NC Central, since they're here, they could be in it every year if they want to be. I don't know. You can work something like that out. But I think that'd be really cool. And it's a no-brainer. And it should have been happening already. And I would love to know what other people think. Maybe you couldn't have one really big-time program come in. Let's say you got an Arizona in there from the Big 12, or you get a Michigan State come in, or you get Florida come in one year. You probably could attract even better programs than the ones I mentioned.
Oh, 100%. I was going to ask you too. I was curious because of your dad going back in the day when he was a student, because when you were saying all this, my mind from a marketing perspective, which is kind of what my background is like, I wonder if back then there was some cheaper ticket price for students, because I think it would make a lot of sense for students to get in for $5, $10 or something like that to help attract obviously that younger demographic and incentivize it to be maybe kind of a more electric atmosphere by having some people in there.
Great idea.
A little bit younger. You know what I mean? Just I wonder, if your dad does he remember? I'm just curious. I wonder if he has.
I don't.
You probably
I would have to ask him. I'm sure he'll watch this when he eats breakfast. He does that sometimes, and then corrects me. And and he'll correct me on this, I'm sure. But I think moving forward, when you go to the NCAA tournament, they have spaces behind the baskets for the opposing bands that are coming in for each session. They also have at the Final Four, behind each basket are student sections. You got one school here, one school there. It's a massive section. And even though the semifinals are the same session, once that first game's over, they usher that student body out and they bring in the next student body for the next game. So I think you could do something like that with this, but maybe have it in sessions. The Carolina student body would just automatically get 150 seats for Carolina's games. If it's Duke, the same thing. If it's State, the same thing. And I would agree with that. I think that's a great idea. Give it a little bit more buzz.
Yeah, for sure. Because You would get students showing out. I mean, any excuse to, especially.
But I think you get, in Carolina's case, this is going to, maybe some people won't like this, but if you're getting a lot of fans in there that aren't always at the Dean Dome, I think it's going to be a little rowdier because those Carolina fans tend to make more noise. It's kind of interesting that Carolina fans are on their feet and pumping their fists in road games more than they are at home. I think a lot of them are different people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because they live over there. They don't get to see them that much. There's a little more energy behind seeing them play whoever. Where at the Dean Dome, we all know what that can be a lot of the time. I think the Dean Dome can be outstanding at times.
Of course.
I think it's underrated at times. But a lot of the times it earns the reputation it has. So there would be a little bit more of a buzz to the Carolina base there. Clearly the Duke base would have it. And I think the NC State base. Can you imagine NC State playing, St. John's on a Sunday at 6 o'clock in the championship there?
Oh, man.
It's a different floor, but can you imagine something like that?
Oh,
can you imagine Carolina playing them? Can you imagine Arizona and Duke playing a game there at 6 o'clock on a Sunday in the championship? I think it would be outstanding for this area. And if you love college basketball like I do, you go. I remember watching Oregon State saying, cool, I'm watching Oregon State.
It's funny because I have this memory, and I don't know if it's like I watched this on TV when I was younger. I want to say I was there, but I have this memory of going to the thing you talked about that State kind of used to host when they played East Carolina one year when I was small. Like I have this memory because my dad graduated from East Carolina.
You played him, I think, in the championship game.
Yeah, I have this memory of being at a game.
That was the night Carolina lost to Santa Clara because Raymond Felton couldn't play in that game. And I remember a lot of the media saying Carolina in the press room, Carolina's behind. They're losing to Santa Clara.
That would have been what, November 2004? Right?
Yeah. But I think State played ECU that night in the final. I covered that.
I swear I was at that game. I have this memory of being at a game where ECU played.
And the atmosphere was electric.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was there. I need to go. I'll have to go ask my dad if I was there or not, because I either watched it on TV or I was there. But my memory is like I was like down by the court, like watching this game. I have to go ask him and see if he remembers. He probably won't, but yeah, I had to throw that in there.
I can't remember all 8 schools that were there. I'll have to go back and look it up. I know Marist was there,
but it was a cool concept. It's cool to see. Like even see it. I'm not a State fan by any means, but even get to see ECU and State play. I mean, early in the season,
what that would do for the area for college basketball, bring in a bunch of programs you don't get to see very often because teams are playing crappy non-conference schedules now. Most people, you can't get into Duke, so it'd be an opportunity to see Duke play if you're a local. Yeah, State doesn't play a lot of great non-conference home games. Carolina doesn't. They have 2 this year, but the rest is junk except ECU. So it gives you a chance to see the teams in this area against some quality opponents. I mean, if you're bringing in Iowa and you're bringing in, Minnesota, I'm going low, mid from these middle from these conferences. Maryland back. God, imagine bringing Maryland back to this area after all that stuff. You bring in Providence, you bring in Seton Hall, you bring in St. John's. Pre or during the Pitino era, you bring in Oklahoma State, you bring in Iowa State, which is pretty good. You bring in from the SEC, you bring in someone like a Missouri, or you bring in LSU, but you go a little bit higher, you bring in Florida, you bring in an Auburn or something like that. Man, this place would be a buzz. It'd be great. Imagine if you're able to get some really big programs in. Imagine like a semifinals on a Friday night where the first game is in Auburn versus Illinois, and the other game is Carolina, Duke, or State, whoever. You kind of set them up at least to get to the semifinals. Carolina, Duke, or State against someone like Arizona.
Well, I mean,
or Gonzaga. That would be an incredible doubleheader.
Yeah, and two, I can guarantee you it's going to generate more revenue than, and no disrespect to the tournament, but the Bad Boy Mowers Atlantis tournament in a 2,000-seat temporary ballroom at a hotel. Like again, it's cool for. I think obviously the students enjoy going down there, and the staff and everybody being able to spend days down there. But it's like from a revenue generating standpoint, I think you're probably going to get more butts in the seats in Raleigh, North Carolina, than you are in the Bahamas because of the cost of going down there and just the lack of amount of people in that area. So, I mean, from a revenue sharing standpoint too, I mean, it just seems like it makes more sense, especially if you kind of rotate the host sites. Even Maui to an extent, I mean, they played at Chaminade. I know it's all, I love the Maui Invitational. It's fantastic, but it's a high school gym. You're not going to get but so many people in those seats. So it kind of makes sense to have something more local in a bigger arena where you can kind of, hey, if you can get 20,000 people in there, great. But if you can get 7, 8, that's nice too. You know,
in a town where they love college basketball, and let's love it again.
Yeah,
let's love it again.
In a town that's just growing every single day too. So I mean, there will be a lot of people.
Somebody moved in during this podcast,
and it's a lot more.
Somebody moved here from somewhere where it's colder.
Yeah, and again, it's a lot more easy. It's a lot easier for a Minnesota fan to, you know, just throwing them out there to get to Raleigh than it is to catch a flight to the Bahamas and spend a week down there. I think I know what the cheaper trip would be for sure. So yeah, I think it just makes a ton of sense, and more importantly, I think it's good for this area and would be a fun tournament to watch, especially if the opponents, like you're saying, are, you know, have to have like the top of the top. You can get some of those top of the top schools, and I think
you would, conference teams.
Yeah, and you'd be able to get some top schools too when you think of Carolina, Duke, and State playing in the tournament. I mean, you'd be able to attract some big names as well. So yeah, man, I think it makes a ton of sense. I'll see if I can. I'm going to see if I can find a link to that piece. I probably won't remember to do it, but I'm going to try to see if I can find a link to the piece you put out and put it in our description below if it still exists out there somewhere. But if not, you heard the podcast this far, you kind of get the gist of it already. Want to hear from y'all. Let us know what you think in the comments.
Come up with other schools.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know if, you know, people watching this or live locally, would you attend something like that? Would you be interested? Do you think that would be something cool that you'd like to see? And again, just gives you another opportunity to not have to go very far, especially in the state of North Carolina or live in this area, to go see North Carolina play.
Elon was in it.
Elon, oh yeah.
Back when Ernie Nestor was the coach. Let's see here.
I feel like a William and Mary was in it, but that could be another false memory. I think that might be from my going to Liberty University basketball games back in the day, because I got family up there. I think maybe I saw them play Liberty one time.
Oh man, keep talking.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to go back in my memory bank and think of what other teams I remember being. I know ECU. I remember that, obviously.
ECU for sure. Marist for sure.
Marist.
Elon. Oregon State.
Yeah, Oregon State.
Somebody like a Fairleigh Dickinson may have been in it. It wasn't a great lineup.
Yeah, but and State hosting it. No offense.
It wasn't a great. Well, no, I don't. There was a reason. BCA Invitational is what it was. Boom. I found it.
There you go.
It was the BCA. Look at that. Look at that freaking picture of Herb Sendek.
Oh, what a throwback right there.
Herb Sendek. You talk about exciting press conferences, baby.
Yeah, between him and Chuck Amato.
Here we go. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Game 1, Pepperdine versus East Carolina. Game 2, Oregon State versus Siena, the Saints. Game 3, New Orleans versus NC State, and that was when Monty Tao was the New Orleans coach.
Makes sense.
And Game 4, Fairleigh Dickinson versus Elon. I mean, that was not a great. I mean, Pepperdine had some good teams in the past. New Orleans a long time ago had the other Irvin Johnson.
You could attract such a better lineup to this tournament, especially now. Especially now.
Yeah, but that was something that State hosted.
Yeah.
So they want to win the tournament.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good
something
point.
Where, you know, you could bring in some good programs, maybe set it up where the local has a great chance at winning it, and certainly getting to the semifinals or the finals. So you can stack one side of the bracket, and then you can make the other side of the bracket where the local team is, Duke, State, or Carolina, has a little easier path. So then you create an Illinois versus one of the three in the title game. How cool would that be? Yeah,
it would be awesome. And it mimics a lot of those tournaments you're talking about early in the year too, because, you know, like even a Maui's lineup's good. The Atlantis is, you know, that lineup has usually got some good teams in it. I mean, a lot of these, not all of them, but a lot of these, you know, early season tournaments do have big schools coming to it. And if, like I said, if you've got a rotation of Duke State and UNC hosting it on a yearly basis, you're going to be able to attract bigger schools than Siena, no disrespect to them. You can have a school like that in there. I think there is a fit for a couple of those, but again, to attract and even early on in the season, you want to play better opponents, quality opponents. So yeah, I think you could definitely bring in some bigger schools.
Marist wasn't one of them. I'm sure I must have covered Marist at NC State at some point.
I'm sure you have, as long as you've been in this. I can almost guarantee you've covered Marist versus NC State at one point.
The Red Foxes.
Yeah, what a name. What a name, man. But yeah, like I said, guys, get involved in the comments. Want to hear from y'all. What do you think about the idea? Would you go to it? We want to hear from you all. Any recommendations you might have? We're just over here spitballing. Who knows? Maybe we'll speak this thing into existence. If this tournament just starts next year in a couple years age, I think you need a little bit of that cut of that, that check or something, man.
The THI Invitational.
Yeah, there we go, man. We'll happily host it. We'll do a podcast live from the court. Let me get on the commentator. I used to do some color commentator and back in the day in college and a little bit after it, so I can get back in my color commentator days and see if I could pick up where I left off.
My play-by-play career was when I was a kid. I would watch games and I would broadcast it into a tape recorder, watch them on TV, and then I go to bed at night. I'd listen to it and I'd critique it. Yeah, when I did radio, when I first got into my radio part of my career, when I was in Wilmington, I had a boom box in the back seat of my car, and I would buy those hour-long cassettes. Right, one tape on one side for an hour, and I could park right next to a back door at the radio station, run right in the studio, and record. Right, and I would hit record, and I would be walking in the studio while my theme song was playing, which was "Fight for Your Right to Party" by Beastie Boys.
Classic.
And I'd be walking in there and it's playing. I grab the headphones and boom, the show starts, because I had to wait till the last second to hit record. Then I go back and listen to it, and I told you I have notepads of critiques of me on the show. And those were my play-by-play days was when I was a kid. One of my things with my buddy that lived in San Francisco, we were going to go to an Orioles game one time back at Old Memorial Stadium when one of those weeknight games where it was a crap crowd, like the Mariners were in town. It'd be like the worst.
Like 15 people there.
And we were going to sit out there, and I was going to do play-by-play, and he was going to do color, and we were going to broadcast and do a tape recorder of the game.
That's fantastic.
We never did it, though, because we just didn't do it.
That's fantastic.
We'd see other sites, we'd wander around, just wouldn't do it.
Some would say
they not have let us in with a tape recorder. Back then, the tape recorders were like this.
Yeah, you're not just putting that in your pocket. Yeah, you're not just putting that in your pocket like you can now, or it's just on your phone.
Think of those cassettes like on Mission Impossible that burn.
Yeah, that's hilarious, man. Yeah, some would say you were born to do this type of stuff, or came out the womb with a notepad.
My mom used to say, my mom would walk into my room and see the indentions of a baseball field on the carpet, and I would draw lines on the wall, which would be the fence, and I'd put 368, even though it wasn't 368 feet. You destroyed this room and you turn it into an athletic complex.
That's fantastic.
Before she died, she'd always say, you were preparing for your job when you were 6 years old.
Yeah, whether you knew it or not, man, you definitely were. Hindsight's 20/20 in that respect. It's pretty wild to think when you think about it. You came a long way, man. You came a long way from those days. From those. Well,
I don't draw on the walls here, but I do have a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I hear you.
These are certain, just some credentials. It was my wife's idea when we moved in here, and you can see I steal things.
Oh yeah, you got to. I mean, they're gonna throw it away anyway. You might as well take it with you. You know what I mean? 100%.
Do you remember when OLN, the Outdoor Network or whatever, used to have the NHL playoffs?
Oh yeah.
I don't want to pull this over there, but I've got a little OLN TV booth.
Oh, that's hilarious.
When I covered the Hurricanes in the 2006 Stanley Cup Finals.
You would have that. You would still have that, I should say.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic, man. Yeah.
I have a Final Four coffee cup, not the kind you buy at a souvenir stand, but the little styrofoam things back in the media room because it had a logo on it.
I've got a bunch of credentials in my closet I've got to figure out something to do with. I want to do a new backdrop, but figure it out.
Back here, there's 4 drawers. I can move this so y'all can see it. This right here, there's 4 drawers, and they're filled with credentials.
I can imagine. God, I can only imagine now. I have a lot of credentials, and you've covered infinitely amount more games than I have, and I feel like I've got.
This one was the first game I ever covered in basketball. That was Carolina at VMI in basketball in December of 1996.
God, I can't believe you still have that. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing, man. Yeah, like I said, some would say you might be born to do this. I think they'd probably be right.
There's my Stanley Cup one right above it. It's Wake Forest season credential above, and then there's Stanley Cup. Above that's NC State.
I'll have to get you to I'm going to ask you on another podcast. I want you to go through them one day and tell me what your most obscure credential would be. The most obscure game you've ever covered.
Charlotte Bobcats right here.
Oh, he's got a Bobcats one. I love it.
I covered the Bobcats when I was at Fox Sports.
I used to go to Bobcats game.
And you know who my go-to guys in the locker room were? They were terrible. The team was
like a little Mecca Okafor up in there or something like that.
Brennan Haywood and Gerald Henderson. I remember talking to Gerald about Tyler, about the nose. Gerald's a great guy,
by the way.
Yeah, Gerald's a great guy. And, I remember walking locker room the first time I saw him, he did a double take. And he had like his eyebrow went up or something like that. And I remember talking to him just like about that. And I filled in for Taylor Zarger took over for Mark Packer in like 2011, I think it was. And I hosted Taylor's show for a week, that whole Mark Packer show. I hosted it for a week and I had Gerald on. And I talked to him. I'd already done it ahead of time in advance just to make sure it was a kosher story. But he said it was pretty wild that a lot of Carolina fans that hated him for what happened with Tyler, but were also Bobcat fans, had to root for him with the Bobcats.
It is funny, man. That's one of the most memorable moments in Carolina history. Yeah. I used to go to Bobcats game about once a year. We would always go there like during Christmas time, and whoever they'd play, we'd go down there for a couple of days and stay downtown, go to a game. And it's been a while since I've been to one. I don't know if I've ever been to a Hornets game, actually.
They had a cheerleader who was one of the 20 finalists for America. What was that America show?
America's Got Talent?
No, the other one.
It's America.
No, that's Simon Cowell.
American Idol?
American Idol, yes. God, forgive me.
Keep going on. There's like 50 of them.
So she was one of the 20 finalists for American Idol. And I was at Fox at the time, and Fox had American Idol, so they wanted me to go do a story on her. So I went to go cover a Bobcats game. I think they played New York that night because I remember Stoudemire was just loafing up and down the court. A couple of us were talking about how, well, he's not bought in tonight. But I went really early so I can go. I talked to her. She was on the dance team of the Bobcats and cheerleaders dance team. And I talked to her, and I talked to 3 of her teammates about her. And I did this big story. Well, I was waiting to talk to her, and I'm sitting on the baseline in the arena. There's nobody else out there except Jeremy Lin, if you remember him, Lin Sanity,
man, yeah.
And an assistant coach, and he's putting Jeremy Lin through this super intense workout. I'm sitting there watching it, and this is before Lin Sanity. Lin Sanity started like 2 weeks later, and he's just grinding his rear end off. The sweat is just pouring on him. They had to have one of the people come out and just dry up the floor for him to keep working out. And then I go back to where the cheerleaders' locker room area is. So I'm like, this is interesting. And you can overwhelmed by perfume and stuff. And I did the interview with her. She was from Alabama. She's an Alabama fan, and Charlotte Panthers. And I talked to 3 of her teammates, went in the press room, had the story written before the basketball game, covered the game that night.
That's fantastic.
So I covered a lot of Bobcat stuff back then. I told you the story about when they drafted Kemba Walker and Paul Silas, who was the head coach. There were 2 of us talking to Paul Silas on media day for a while, and he was complaining about drafting Kemba Walker.
Yeah, they were like, yeah,
it was great stuff.
That interview didn't age well.
I could go on stories about stuff like that forever, man.
Yeah,
but the Lin Sanity stuff, it's like, who is this guy? And I look at you, went to Harvard. I said, that's cool. That's pretty cool watching the guy. I love watching practice. 2 weeks later, he's the biggest story in NBA.
Oh, man, he was lights out for, what was it, a month or a couple weeks, however long it was. He was unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. Yeah, no, I remember that time very well. Yeah. No, rest in peace, Charlotte Bobcats. Or the Hornets. Not the greatest.
I never covered them as the Hornets before or after, only as the Bobcats.
Yeah.
That's what makes that such an obscure thing.
Yeah, Bobcats just didn't work, did it? Just never worked. It really didn't.
They didn't draw. They had terrible crowds.
No. Yeah.
But I enjoy, one of the things I learned about when I covered them is that they really do. I mean, you got to play defense. You may not always play it, but there was my buddy, one of my best friends, he was in my wedding, covered the Portland Trailblazers for quite a while. He was in Wilmington, went and covered the Portland Trailblazers, and he really helped me understand, there is a method to the madness in the NBA. A lot of people just dismiss it that are pro college basketball, like I am. I'm not a big NBA fan. But when I covered it, I really appreciated the process. And that these guys are ball players, obviously, but there's a lot that goes into it. It's just not pickup basketball like a lot of people think. And I appreciated that part of it, especially with a team that wasn't very good.
Yeah,
that was the time I talked to I told you when the Heat came in, If you walk in the Heat's locker room, that was LeBron, Wade,
D-Wade, Chris Bosh era.
And LeBron, you walk in the locker room, let's say it's like the phone, it's kind of shaped like this. Back here is like the shower area. So you got a few lockers like this and a bunch of lockers like that. LeBron and Wade were next to each other right here, and Bosh was right here. It made it impossible to try to talk to either one of them sitting right there because they're so close together. We deal with that with Carolina sometimes. So kind of Wade just sort of let everybody talk to LeBron. So I'm just standing there right in front of LeBron talking to him like I would, Harrison Barnes at the time, which is about the same era. Hey, it was cool. I mean, you talk to LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, you get out and you write your story. But it was interesting that they didn't spread out because some of us complain when you go to Chapel Hill or you go to Carolina, especially on the road, that the guys most people want to talk to happen to be sitting next to each other in the locker room. So if you ever listen to the interviews, you'll hear one guy, especially if it's a deep voice guy like Jalen Withers, you hear them coming in onto the interview that you're actually conducting.
Yeah, I was at that. I was at a game when LeBron and D-Wade and Bosh played. I think they were still the Bobcats at that point. But yeah, we were way up in the rafters. We used to get really good seats for other games, but that was such a highly sought after game.
Well, they played also in Raleigh an exhibition.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah. But yeah, it was a cool game to go to. I think it was the famous picture where D-Wade threw the lob to LeBron and kind of put his hands out like that. I think that was against the Bosh. I believe, or maybe it wasn't that. I can't remember what it was, but I remember Cam Newton was courtside, and I think D-Wade hit the game-winning shot right in front of Cam and like dapped him up or something like that. It was a pretty cool game to go to. I'll never forget that game. Only time I've ever seen LeBron in person either. But
yeah, I covered a lot of Georgia Tech in Bosh's only year there. And so I'm like, yeah, I know his game. Wait, that's fine. I'm watching LeBron. And I was just fixated on him and stuff. And Fox wanted me to write a LeBron angle, obviously.
Oh, of course.
If I could. And I don't really remember a lot of specifics from the game other than the fact that I was surprised at how often he played on the wing. You see it on TV, but in TV, you kind of have to look where the camera shows you. But in person, you get to look at what you want to look at. And he spent a lot of time on the wing.
Yeah. So fun to watch.
He could see everything, man.
Still playing too. Pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, say what you will about him, and there's a lot of people don't like him, but you have to appreciate that he's one of the best ever.
Oh, no doubt about it.
I mean, he could be a real pain in the rear, but
I'm sure. Yeah,
one of the best ever, and he is.
Yeah, the longevity there is unbelievable, not to mention the talent. So, yeah, somehow we've gone on talking about the Charlotte Bobcats for the last 10 minutes. But again, that's what we do on these pods. We tend to derail these pretty quickly. But yeah, we made it through at least a good part of it without derailing it. So I'm pretty proud of us for that. But as I've said, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. We'll go ahead and get out of here. Get involved in the comments. Make sure you keep it locked to our social channels and hopefully be able to announce something soon. And thanks for watching as always. See you guys next time.
Thanks.